At my sister's royal-themed wedding, she sneered, blocking the entrance. You'll ruin the aesthetic. Her security guards stood firm. You're too basic for the photos. We have a standard to uphold. The humiliation was absolute. But I returned in a $2 million car, a mysterious guest beside me. The sneers turned to stunned silence, then gasps of shock and burgeoning curiosity. Who was my companion? You need to leave. Now. The security guard's grip on my shoulder was firm, professional, and absolutely wrong. Behind him, through the grand entrance of the Grandview estate, I could see the soft glow of chandeliers and hear the string quartet playing Mozart, the same piece our mother had hummed while cooking Sunday dinners. My sister Elena stood just inside the doorway, her wedding dress catching the light like freshly fallen snow, and when our eyes met, she lifted her chin with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Dismissive. Like I was a stranger who'd wandered in off the street instead of the person who'd held her hair back during her first heartbreak, who'd sold my car to help pay for her law school applications, who'd promised our dying mother I'd always protect her. The morning had started so differently. I'd woken at 5:30 a.m. as I had every Tuesday for the past 8 years, ever since our parents' accident left us orphaned and clinging to whatever rituals could make us feel less alone in the world. The lavender tea I prepared was the same blend our mother used to make, imported from a small shop in Chinatown that Elena and I had discovered together during one of our grief-wandering walks through the city. I'd driven to her penthouse with the thermos warm between my hands, using my spare key to let myself in as always. Elena had been sitting at her marble kitchen island, wedding planning folders spread before her like evidence in one of her legal cases. She looked up when I entered, and for just a moment her face had broken into that genuine smile I knew from childhood, the one where her nose crinkled slightly and her eyes disappeared into happy crescents. Sarah, thank God you're here. I'm drowning in seating charts and Caleb's mother keeps texting about the wine selection. We'd spent that morning the way we'd spent countless others, her talking through her anxieties while I organized the chaos into manageable tasks. She'd grabbed my hand at one point, her engagement ring pressing cold against my skin, and said, I couldn't do this without you, Sarah. You know that, right? But even then, something had felt rehearsed about the words, like she was reading from a script someone else had written. The changes had been gradual at first, so subtle I'd convinced myself I was imagining them. 3 days before the wedding, when I'd brought over the spring rolls, our grandmother's recipe that Elena had begged me to make for every major event in her life, she'd wrinkled her nose and called them ethnic food. The word had sat strange in the air between us. Caleb thinks we should serve more universal appetizers at the reception, she'd explained, pushing the container aside. You understand. But I didn't understand. Not when she suggested I should consider getting my hair professionally styled because my usual look was a bit casual for the photography. Not when she mentioned that Dad's old colleague, Mr. Patterson, who'd sent us Christmas cards every year since the funeral, wouldn't be attending because Caleb has curated the guest list for maximum networking potential. The Elena I knew would have insisted Mr. Patterson sit at our family table, would have made sure he felt welcomed and appreciated. That evening I'd been helping arrange gift bags in the hotel lobby when I'd overheard Caleb on the phone. His voice carried that particular tone of casual authority that wealthy men perfect, the kind that makes demands sound like suggestions. The sister situation will be handled, he'd said. I've already briefed security. Elena understands the image we're projecting. When I'd confronted Elena about it later, she'd laughed, but it was hollow, empty of the warmth I'd known all my life. You're being paranoid, Sarah. Caleb's just particular about details. It's what makes him successful. The rehearsal dinner should have been my first real warning. I'd arrived early to help with setup, wearing the dress Elena had picked out for me months ago, a soft coral that she'd said complemented my skin tone perfectly. But when the guests began arriving and everyone took their seats, I found my place card at a table near the kitchen, seated between Caleb's ancient great-aunt who spoke no English and a +1 who spent the entire dinner on his phone. Meanwhile, Caleb's business associates occupied the family table where I should have been, where our parents would have been. I'd prepared a speech about Elena and me growing up together, about the time she'd convinced me to help her build a blanket fort that took over our entire living room, about how she'd held my hand at our parents' funeral and promised we'd always have each other. But when I stood to speak, Caleb had immediately interjected. We're running behind schedule, he'd announced, though we weren't. Perhaps we can save the emotional tributes for tomorrow. Elena hadn't even looked up from her phone, just nodded absently like I was a vendor being dismissed rather than her only family. Aunt Margaret, our mother's sister who'd flown in from Seattle, had leaned over to whisper in my ear. "This isn't right, Sarah. Your parents would be heartbroken to see how she's treating you." Her weathered hand had covered mine, age spots prominent against my younger skin. "That man has changed her. You see it, don't you? Now, standing on these marble steps in the midnight blue dress I'd spent a month's salary on, being physically prevented from entering my own sister's wedding, I finally understood the full scope of what had happened. The security guard's hand remained on my shoulder, not violent but immovable, while guests I'd known since childhood streamed past with uncomfortable glances. Mrs. Chun from our church slowed her pace, her eyes wide with shock at seeing me barred from entry. She squeezed my arm as she passed, whispering, "This isn't right," before her husband guided her inside. "Too provincial," Elena had said, the words carrying across the space between us like poison. "You'll understand someday, Sarah. This is about creating the right atmosphere." She turned away then, Caleb's hand on her lower back guiding her into the ballroom, and I was left standing in the gathering dusk, wondering when my little sister had become a stranger wearing Elena's face. The apartment door clicked shut behind me with a finality that echoed through my chest. My keys clattered onto the counter, the sound sharp in the silence. The clock on my microwave read 11:47 p.m., but time had become meaningless since that security guard's hand had pressed against my shoulder 3 hours ago. The midnight blue dress clung to me, damp with evening dew and something else. Maybe shame, maybe rage. I couldn't tell anymore. I stood in my kitchen for a full minute, staring at the wine bottle on my counter. A Pinot Noir Elena had brought over last month, back when she still remembered we existed outside of Caleb's carefully constructed world. My hand reached for it, then stopped. The coffee maker sat beside it, and I found myself measuring grounds into the filter, filling the reservoir with water. The machine gurgled to life, and I realized what I was doing. Wine would numb this. Coffee would sharpen it. And sharp was what I needed now. While the coffee brewed, I unzipped the dress, letting it pool around my feet. The fabric looked black in the darkness, like all the color had been drained from it along with my dignity. I pulled on sweatpants and an old t-shirt from college, the soft cotton a relief against my skin. The coffee maker beeped and I poured a cup, black, no sugar. The bitterness felt appropriate. My laptop sat on the dining table where I'd left it this morning. Was that really just this morning? After checking the weather for the wedding. I opened it, the screen's glow harsh in the dark room. The Facebook page was still open, showing photos of Elena and Caleb at various events, their smiles perfect and practiced. I closed it and opened a new browser window. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before typing, Caleb's Sterling Meridian Innovations. The results populated immediately. A slick website with stock photos of people in suits shaking hands. Testimonials from clients with generic names. An About Us page that said everything and nothing at the same time. Revolutionary solutions. Paradigm shifts. Synergistic approaches. The kind of corporate speak that sounds impressive until you realize it doesn't actually mean anything. I grabbed a legal pad from my work bag. The habit of keeping one nearby had served me well in forensic accounting, and started taking notes. The business address listed was in the financial district, Suite 4500. Impressive. I opened another tab and searched the address. The building existed, but when I dug deeper into the tenant directory, Suite 4500 was listed as available for lease. My phone buzzed, the sound startling in the quiet apartment. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. Marcus Huang, my colleague who'd started at the firm the same week I did 5 years ago. We'd bonded over terrible break room coffee and the shared imposter syndrome of being the youngest people in the office. "Sarah, I know it's late, but I saw the Instagram stories from the wedding. Are you okay?" I almost laughed. Instagram stories. Of course the humiliation was already public. "I'm fine, Marcus. Just doing some research." There was a pause. Then, "Research on Meridian Innovations?" I froze. "How did you? You asked me about them last week, remember? When Elena mentioned Caleb's company during lunch." His voice had changed, becoming quieter, more serious. "Sarah, I need to tell you something, but not over the phone. Can you meet me at the office? I know it's late, but this is important." 20 minutes later, I sat across from Marcus in our empty office building, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. He'd brought his laptop and a folder thick with printouts. His usually cheerful face was drawn with concern. After you asked about Meridian, I did some digging. Professional curiosity, you know? He opened his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. The company has ghost employees on payroll. People who don't exist receiving regular salaries. The office address is a mail forwarding service. But here's the really interesting part. He turned the screen toward me. Caleb Morrison, not Sterling. SEC violations from 5 years ago that mysteriously vanished from federal databases. The coffee I'd drunk turned to acid in my stomach. Morrison. He legally changed his name 5 years ago. Right around the time several fraud investigations in Miami went cold. Marcus pulled out a printout, highlighted sections glowing yellow under the harsh lights. 3 separate cases. All targeting wealthy women recently divorced or widowed. Combined losses of over $8 million. My hands shook as I read through the testimonies. Margaret Winters, 62, widowed, lost her entire retirement fund. Patricia Coleman, 58, divorced, mortgaged her house to invest. Jennifer Ross, 45, sold her late husband's business. Each woman described the same thing. A charming man who made them feel special, who understood their loneliness, who promised them partnership in something revolutionary. He made me feel chosen, Margaret Winters had told the Miami Herald. Like I was the only one who understood his vision. He said we were building something together, that I wasn't just an investor but a partner. I gave him everything. Marcus leaned back in his chair, watching me process the information. Sarah, people who can make federal investigations disappear don't do it with good intentions. Whatever Caleb is, whoever he really is, he's dangerous. You need to be careful. I nodded, but my mind was already racing ahead. Back at my apartment, I dove deeper into the internet's forgotten corners. Court records, archived newspaper articles, cached social media pages. At 3:47 a.m., my eyes burning and my 6th cup of coffee cold beside me, I found a business registration in Delaware for Morrison Enterprises, filed 6 years ago, dissolved 1 year later. The same pattern. The same promises. Different victims. Then at 4:03 a.m. I found it. Hidden in the vastness of Instagram, an account with only 47 followers at Real Caleb Morrison. The profile was sparse, but the recent posts were damning. Photos from 2 weeks ago at Oceanside Beach. The same beach where Caleb had supposedly been at a business conference. But he wasn't alone. A woman with long dark hair and bright green eyes was beside him, her hand resting on her visibly pregnant belly. The caption made my blood run cold. 6 months until our little miracle arrives. 3 heart emojis followed. The woman, tagged as Valentina Rodriguez, had commented, "Our son will be so loved." And Caleb's response, posted just 3 days ago, "Both my boys will be." Both my boys. The wedding invitation sat beside my laptop, its gold lettering now seeming like a mockery. The celebration of eternal love between Elena Chin and Caleb Sterling. I wondered if Valentina had received a similar promise. I wondered how many women had. The Instagram photo burned in my mind as I sat in my car outside my apartment building at sunrise. Valentina Rodriguez. The name felt heavy on my tongue when I whispered it to the empty car. The address I'd found through a reverse image search of her profile photos led to Riverside Commons, a neighborhood I'd only driven through, never stopped in. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I made the decision. Elena deserved to know. We all deserved the truth. The drive started in familiar territory. I passed the artisan coffee shop where Elena and I used to meet every Sunday before Caleb monopolized her weekends. The boutique where she'd bought her rehearsal dinner dress, gushing about how Caleb had given her his credit card and told her to spare no expense. The streets gradually changed character as I drove east, the storefronts shifting from designer brands to check cashing services and discount groceries. My GPS announced uncertainly that I'd reached my destination, but the building numbers didn't match. I pulled into a gas station where an older man was hosing down the concrete. When I asked for Riverside Commons, he looked at my car, a modest sedan, nothing fancy but apparently still out of place here, and shook his head. "You sure you got the right address? That building's not exactly." He paused, searching for polite words. "It's seen better days. Lot of problems with the landlord. You visiting someone?" I nodded and he gave me directions that involved landmarks instead of street names. Turn left at the broken billboard, right after the yellow house with the chain-link fence. The deeper I drove into the neighborhood, the more I understood the disparity of Caleb's double life. Elena's penthouse had a doorman and marble floors. The building I finally found had a door propped open with a brick and mailboxes hanging off their hinges. The parking lot was more patch than pavement, broken glass crunching under my tires. A children's bicycle lay abandoned near the entrance, one wheel missing. The contrast hit me physically. How did Caleb sleep at night knowing he kept one woman in luxury while the mother of his child lived here? I climbed 3 flights of stairs, the handrail wobbling under my grip. Apartment 3F had a welcome mat that read, "Bless this home," in faded letters. I knocked, my heart hammering against my ribs. Footsteps approached slowly, accompanied by the sound of multiple locks being undone. The woman who opened the door was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or designer clothes. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her green eyes, the same striking shade from the photos, looked at me with immediate recognition. She wore an oversized t-shirt that stretched over her pregnant belly and leggings with a hole in the knee. "You have Elena's eyes," she said simply. "But Kinder." The words knocked the prepared speech from my head. She stepped aside, gesturing for me to enter, and I found myself in a small apartment that smelled of vanilla candles and something else, mildew that no amount of air freshener could quite mask. The living room was clean but sparse, with furniture that looked like it came from different garage sales. A pregnancy book lay open on the coffee table next to a notepad covered in budget calculations. "Would you like some tea?" Valentina moved toward the kitchen with the careful gait of someone 7 months pregnant, one hand supporting her lower back. "I'm sorry, I don't have anything fancy. Just regular Lipton." The unnecessary apology made my chest tight. I watched her fill a kettle with water, noticed how she had to rest against the counter for a moment before reaching for the mugs. The cups were chipped, mismatched, one advertising a dental office, the other from a casino. "You don't have to apologize," I said, accepting the mug gratefully. The tea was too hot, but I sipped it anyway, needing something to do with my hands. Valentina lowered herself carefully onto the couch, wincing slightly. "I know who you are. Sir, right? He talked about you sometimes. Never nicely." She managed a tired smile. "That's how I knew you were probably a good person." She reached for her phone on the coffee table, scrolling through messages before handing it to me. "You should see these. You should know what kind of man your sister is marrying." The messages went back 2 years. Thousands of them. I scrolled through promises that grew more elaborate as time passed. "Just need to liquidate some assets, then we can get our place. The investors are interested, this could be our big break. After this merger goes through, we'll never have to worry about money again. 6 months ago, found the perfect house for us and the baby. Just need another month to close the deal. 3 months ago, the penthouse is almost ready. You'll love the nursery. Last month, everything I'm doing is for you and our son." "I worked double shifts," Valentina said quietly, her hands cradling her belly. 12 hours at the hospital, sometimes 16. He said his assets were temporarily frozen because of some complicated business deal. Said he didn't want to touch the money until everything was finalized because it would affect the terms. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I was saving for our baby while he was living in a penthouse with your sister." She struggled to stand and I moved to help her, but she waved me off. "I need to show you something else." In her bedroom, barely large enough for a double bed and a dresser, she pulled out a folder from under her mattress. Inside were printed emails, screenshots, documents. I started keeping records when things didn't add up. When his stories began contradicting themselves. One email made my stomach drop. It was from Caleb to someone named Derek, dated 3 weeks ago. "The Chin deal is almost locked. Once I have access to her father's legal network, we can move forward with the Miami expansion. Elena doesn't suspect anything. She's too infatuated to ask questions." "There's more," Valentina said, sitting heavily on the bed. "He told me Elena was just business. That her family name would open doors his money couldn't buy. Her father was some important judge, right? Left behind a reputation that still carries weight in legal circles." She looked at me with those tired green eyes. "He said once he had what he needed, the connections, the introductions, the contracts signed using the Chin family reputation, he'd divorce her within a year. Maybe less. The room felt airless. My sister wasn't just being deceived. She was being used as a key to unlock doors Caleb couldn't open on his own. Her name, our father's legacy, our family's reputation. All of it was just currency to him. He has another son, Valentina said suddenly. Did you know that? The boy would be about 3 now. The mother lives in Phoenix. He sends money sometimes when he remembers. She rubbed her belly unconsciously. I found out 2 months ago. He said that was different, that she had trapped him, but we were real. I looked around the shabby apartment, at this pregnant woman who'd believed in love while the man she trusted lived a completely different life 15 miles away. Why didn't you leave? When you found out about Elena. Valentina's hand stilled on her belly. Where would I go? I'm 7 months pregnant. I've used all my savings for baby supplies and medical bills. My family, they wouldn't understand. They think Caleb and I are already married. She met my eyes. I've been trapped by my own hope that somehow it would work out. That he'd choose us. The morning sun filtered through cheap blinds, casting bars of light across the worn carpet. Somewhere in the building a baby cried. Normal life continued around us while we sat in the wreckage of Caleb's deceptions, 2 women brought together by one man's lies. I sat across from Valentina for another moment, watching her fold and refold a tiny onesie she'd pulled from a basket beside the couch. The fabric was worn soft from washing, probably bought secondhand, but clean and carefully maintained. Her fingers traced the little yellow ducks printed on the front, and I saw her throat work as she swallowed back emotion. He's never even asked what we're naming the baby, she said quietly. 7 months and he doesn't know I picked Sebastian after my father. I reached across the space between us and placed my hand over hers. Your son deserves better than a father who pretends he doesn't exist. And you deserve better than being hidden away like some shameful secret. What can I do? Her voice cracked. I have no money for lawyers. No proof that would stand up in court. He's careful about what he puts in writing. You don't need lawyers, I said, an idea forming with crystal clarity. You need witnesses. 200 of them, dressed in their finest clothes, unable to look away. Valentina's eyes widened as she understood what I was suggesting. The wedding. You want me to go to the wedding? Not just go. Arrive in a way that makes it impossible for him to deny you exist. For him to deny Sebastian exists. I pulled out my phone, checking the date. The ceremony is in 3 days. That gives us time to prepare. What if he has security throw me out? What if... She stopped, her hand moving protectively to her belly. What if he tries to take the baby later out of spite? Secrets give him power, Valentina. Once everyone knows, once Elena knows, he loses that power. He can't take a child from a mother who has documentation of abandonment, who has witnesses to his denial. I thought of my work in forensic accounting, how often the cover-up became worse than the crime. Exposure is protection. She stood slowly, moving to the window that overlooked the parking lot. A mother was loading groceries into a beat-up sedan while her toddler tried to catch pigeons. Normal life, the kind Valentina should have had. I kept all his messages, she said finally. Every promise. Every lie. I even recorded some of our phone calls, the ones where he talked about Elena being temporary. She turned to face me. I knew something was wrong, but I loved him. Love makes you stupid. Love makes you hopeful, I corrected. There's a difference. She nodded slowly, then more firmly. Hey, I'll do it. But I don't have anything to wear to a society wedding. We'll figure that out, I promised, already mentally cataloging my savings account. For now, I need you to think about exactly what you want to say if given the chance. Not accusations, just truth. I left Valentina's apartment with her phone number written on a napkin she'd torn from a pizza delivery menu, the only paper she could find quickly. The drive home felt different, purposeful now rather than aimless. I had calls to make. The first was to James Morrison, no relation to Caleb despite the shared surname. James owned a luxury car rental empire that I'd helped save from internal embezzlement last year. The case had been complex, involving falsified inventory records and shadow accounts, but we'd recovered nearly $3 million. He told me then that he owed me a favor. I was about to collect. James answered on the third ring, sounds of ocean waves in the background. Sarah Chin. To what do I owe the pleasure? Please tell me my accountant hasn't been creative again. No, James. I need a favor. A big one. I explained the situation, leaving nothing out. The betrayed sister, the hidden pregnant girlfriend, the con artist groom. James listened without interrupting, occasionally making thoughtful sounds. When I finished, there was a long pause. My daughter, he said finally, went through something similar 15 years ago. Different details, same destruction. The man had 3 fiancées in 3 different states. His voice hardened. The phantom will be delivered to your apartment tomorrow morning. Driver included if you need one. James, I can't. You saved my company, Sarah. More than that, you saved my reputation. Sometimes justice needs proper presentation, and nothing says, you cannot ignore this quite like arriving in a $2 million car. He paused. Besides, it's been sitting in the showroom. Cars like that need to be driven with purpose. After we hung up, my phone immediately buzzed with an incoming call. Rachel Winters, one of Elena's bridesmaids and her study partner through 3 years of law school. Sarah, thank God. We need to talk about Elena. Jen and Amy are here too. We're on speaker. I heard shuffling, then Jennifer's voice came through. We've been worried for months. Elena's changed since she got with Caleb. Changed how? I asked, though I already knew. She dropped out of our book club, Rachel said. When we asked why, she said Caleb thought it was intellectual masturbation and a waste of time that could be spent on real networking. Amy's voice cut in sharp with anger. She turned down a position at Cromwell and Associates. The position she dreamed about since first year. Said Caleb needed her to focus on their business ventures. He's isolating her, Jennifer added. Classic abuser tactics. We've all seen it before in our pro bono domestic violence work. Separate the victim from support systems, make them dependent, control the narrative. We know something's planned, Rachel said. Elena mentioned you weren't coming to the wedding, which made no sense. You're her only family. We want to help, Sarah. Whatever you're planning, we're in. I felt my throat tighten with unexpected emotion. Elena hadn't just lost me, she'd lost an entire network of women who cared about her, all sacrificed on the altar of Caleb's control. Can you 3 make sure you're near the altar during the ceremony? Front row if possible. We're bridesmaids, Amy said. We'll be right there. Good. Because what's going to happen will happen fast and Elena will need you. After ending the call, I spread Elena's wedding timeline across my kitchen table. She'd shared it with me weeks ago, back when I was still supposed to be maid of honor. Every minute was accounted for in her color-coded schedule. Processional at 4 o'clock. Opening remarks at 4:10. Vows at 4:20. Ring exchange at 4:25. Photos at 4:30 during golden hour. If Valentina and I arrived at 4:15, just before the vows, Caleb would have no time to manage the situation. Too many witnesses, too much momentum in the ceremony to simply stop everything. He'd have to react in real time without his usual script. I called Valentina. Can you wear purple? Purple. It was Elena's favorite color. Before Caleb convinced her that white and gold were more sophisticated. It might help her remember who she was before him. There was silence, then a soft laugh. I have a purple dress. Nothing fancy, but it fits over the bump. Perfect, I said, looking at the wedding timeline again. Valentina, we're going to need to time this perfectly. The morning of Elena's wedding arrived with the kind of brilliant sunshine that seemed to mock the storm we were about to unleash. I stood outside Valentina's apartment building at noon, holding a purple maternity dress I'd bought that morning. The fabric was soft jersey that would drape elegantly over her belly, with an empire waist and 3/4 sleeves. Nothing extravagant but dignified. The color was the exact shade of purple Elena used to paint her bedroom walls in high school, before she met Caleb and decided purple was too juvenile. When Valentina opened her door and saw the dress, her eyes immediately filled with tears. No one's bought me anything nice since this started, she whispered, running her fingers over the fabric. I helped her into it, the purple complementing her olive skin beautifully. As I worked on her hair, creating a simple but elegant low bun, she began talking about her father. His name was Sebastian Rodriguez. He was a carpenter, built custom furniture with his hands. Died when I was 12 from a heart attack at his workbench. Her voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling slightly. He never got to walk me down an aisle. Never knew he'd have a grandson. That's why I chose Sebastian for the baby's name. It's a beautiful name, I said, securing the last bobby pin. She stood and looked at herself in the cracked mirror propped against her bedroom wall. For the first time since I'd met her, she stood straighter, shoulders back. What do I say if someone asks who I am? The truth. You're Valentina Rodriguez and you're carrying Caleb Morrison's child. She repeated it several times, each repetition stronger than the last. I watched her transformation in the mirror, from hidden mistress to woman with nothing left to hide. The victim narrative was dissolving, replaced by something fiercer. A mother protecting her child's right to exist. At exactly 3:30 p.m., the Rolls-Royce Phantom arrived outside Valentina's building. The car was pristine white, almost bridal in its perfection. The driver, a distinguished man in his 60s, stepped out and opened the door for us without a word, just a respectful nod. Valentina gasped when she saw the interior. Cream leather seats, polished wood panels, crystal decanters in the bar, though we wouldn't be drinking. This must cost a fortune to rent. Sometimes justice needs the right presentation, I said, helping her with the seatbelt extender for her belly. The drive to the Grandview estate took us through the heart of the city. We passed the small Lutheran church where our parents had exchanged vows 35 years ago. Mom had worn our grandmother's pearl necklace, the one Elena was supposed to wear today. I wondered if she even remembered that tradition, or if Caleb had convinced her that family heirlooms were outdated. We drove past Mercy General Hospital, where Elena had been born during a snowstorm. Dad had missed the first 3 hours of her life because he'd been stuck in traffic and Mom never let him forget it. The memory made my chest ache. They would have seen through Caleb immediately. Dad with his detective's instinct for liars, and Mom with her fierce protectiveness of her daughters. The courthouse came into view next, its limestone columns gleaming in the afternoon sun. Elena had called me crying with joy the day she passed the bar exam there, saying she wished our parents could have seen it. I told her they would have been so proud. Now I wondered what they'd think of what their daughter had become under Caleb's influence. Valentina's hand found mine across the center console. Her palm was damp with nervousness, but her grip was steady. Your parents would be proud of you, she said quietly, for protecting her even when she pushed you away. The words hit me unexpectedly hard. I squeezed her hand back, unable to speak for a moment. The car felt less like luxury transportation and more like armor, protection for what we were about to do. This wasn't about revenge anymore, I realized. It wasn't about humiliation or getting even. It was about revelation. Truth. Saving my sister from a man who saw her as nothing more than a stepping stone. We arrived at the Grandview estate at 4:14 p.m. Perfect timing. The same security guard who had barred me from the rehearsal dinner was stationed at the entrance. I watched his face change as the Rolls-Royce pulled up. Confusion, recognition, understanding, all in the span of seconds. He approached the car as we exited, his hand moving reflexively toward his radio before stopping. His eyes went from me to Valentina's prominent belly to the purple dress that couldn't hide her pregnancy. Something shifted in his expression. "Ma'am," he said to me, his voice carefully neutral. "I have specific instructions." "We're guests who arrived late," I said, meeting his eyes steadily. "Traffic was terrible." He looked at Valentina again, then back at me. I could see the war playing out on his face. His instructions versus his conscience. Another guard had walked over, younger, and he actually stepped forward to open the door for us. "Good luck," the younger guard whispered as we passed. The older guard said nothing, just stepped aside. Even hired security, it seemed, could sense when something wasn't right. The ballroom entrance loomed before us. Tall double doors opened wide to reveal a fairy tale setting. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across white silk draping. Hundreds of white roses formed archways and centerpieces, their perfume almost overwhelming. The string quartet was mid-piece, something classical and romantic that felt grotesquely inappropriate for what was about to happen. We stepped inside and the effect was immediate. The mother of the groom, seated in the front row, turned at the movement. Her eyes went wide. She nudged her husband, who turned and promptly dropped his program. The wave of recognition spread like ripples in a pond. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. A woman at the third table actually stood up. Aunt Margaret, my mother's sister, her hand pressed to her heart as she recognized me. Caleb's business partners, clustered at a table near the front, leaned forward with the intensity of sharks who detected blood in the water. One was already pulling out his phone, probably texting his lawyer. Through it all, the photographer, Diana, one of Elena's friends from college, kept shooting. Her camera clicked rapidly as she understood that the real story of this wedding was just beginning. She moved to get a better angle, positioning herself to capture whatever was about to unfold. The string quartet faltered, the cellist hitting a wrong note before recovering. The sound seemed to break whatever spell had kept people frozen. Whispers began rising from the tables, a susurrus of speculation and shock. The whispers died completely as we approached the altar. Each step felt measured, deliberate, our footfalls on marble the only sound besides the faint rustle of Valentina's dress. My sister stood at the front like a figure carved from ice, her $12,000 gown catching the light from the stained glass windows. The afternoon sun painted colored shadows across her face, blue, gold, crimson, as if the universe itself was revealing her shifting emotions. Elena's expression began its transformation the moment she saw me. Confusion came first, her perfectly shaped eyebrows drawing together. I wasn't supposed to be here. She'd made certain of that. Her eyes flickered to the bridesmaids, Rachel, Jennifer, and Amy, who stood frozen in their lavender dresses, watching the scene unfold with barely concealed anticipation. Then Elena's gaze shifted to Valentina, and I watched my sister's lawyer brain begin its work. She studied the purple dress, the careful styling, the obvious pregnancy. Her eyes traced Valentina's face with the same intensity she used when examining evidence. I could see her searching her memory, trying to place this woman who'd walked into her wedding with such purpose. The recognition didn't come all at once. It started in her eyes, a widening that had nothing to do with her carefully applied makeup. Her gaze dropped to Valentina's belly, prominent and undeniable beneath the purple fabric. Then back to Valentina's face. Then to me. Back and forth like she was reading between lines of text, finding a truth hidden in the margins. The minister, an elderly man who'd clearly never encountered this situation in 40 years of performing ceremonies, clutched his prayer book and looked between us all with growing alarm. Should I continue? Before anyone could answer, a single word escaped Caleb's lips, unbidden and devastating in its simplicity. Valentina. The name floated through the ballroom like a lit match falling toward gasoline. His groomsmen, 3 men I'd never seen before tonight, reacted immediately. The one closest to Caleb, a tall man with prematurely gray hair, actually took a step backward, physically distancing himself from whatever was about to happen. Another pulled out his phone, probably to record or call a lawyer. The third just stared, mouth slightly open, looking between Caleb and Valentina like he was watching a car accident in slow motion. Caleb's hand moved toward his jacket pocket where his phone was, then stopped. What was the point? Security couldn't remove us without causing an even bigger scene. 200 guests were leaning forward in their seats, their collective attention focused entirely on this moment. His perfectly practiced smile, the one that had charmed my sister, that had convinced investors, that had fooled so many, cracked and fell away like old paint. What replaced it was something I'd never seen on his face before. Not quite fear, not quite anger. Something cornered and calculating, dangerous in its desperation. His jaw clenched, the muscle jumping beneath his skin. His hands, which had been relaxed at his sides, curled into fists. Valentina moved forward with surprising grace, her hand resting protectively on her belly. The purple dress swayed with each step, and I noticed Elena's eyes track the color with something like recognition. When Valentina spoke, her voice carried across the silent ballroom with unexpected strength. I'm the woman he promised to marry 2 years ago. She didn't shout. Didn't cry. The words came out like testimony, clear and factual. The kind of truth that needed no embellishment. The mother of his child. A collective gasp rose from the guests. Someone's champagne glass hit the floor, the crash sharp in the silence that followed. But Valentina wasn't finished. 7 months along. It's a boy. She kept her eyes on Caleb, never wavering. We were going to name him after Caleb's father, the one he told me died when he was young. She paused, letting the words sink in, then delivered the final blow with surgical precision. But I recently learned his father is alive and living in Connecticut, isn't he? The last question hung in the air like an accusation. Several guests turned to look at Caleb's mother, who had gone pale beneath her elaborate hat. Her husband, Caleb's very much alive father, sat rigid beside her, his face flushing red with what looked like rage or humiliation or both. Elena's bouquet slipped from her fingers. The sound it made hitting the marble floor, soft, almost gentle, seemed impossibly loud in the silence. White roses and baby's breath scattered across the floor like accusations, rolling toward Caleb's feet. One rose came to rest against his polished shoe, and he stared at it as if it might bite him. When Elena finally spoke, her voice carried all the authority of her legal training. Every word was measured, controlled, despite the tears I could see gathering in her eyes. Is it true? She looked directly at Caleb, waiting. The entire room waited with her. Is she carrying your child? The question hung between them like a blade. Caleb's mouth opened and I could see him preparing to spin, to deflect, to somehow turn this around. His lips formed the beginning of what was probably, Elena, you don't understand. But my sister's hand came up, sharp and definitive. The gesture was small but absolute. The same motion she used in court to stop a witness from continuing down an irrelevant path. Her engagement ring caught the light, sending rainbow fractures across the wall behind them. That ring, I realized, was probably purchased with money he'd taken from some other woman he'd deceived. Caleb's words died in his throat. His silence stretched, filling the space with its own kind of confession. Because what could he say? Valentina stood there, 7 months pregnant, in front of 200 witnesses. His parents sat in the front row, his very much alive father serving as proof of yet another lie. His groomsmen had already begun edging away from him, preparing their own exits from this disaster. The minister cleared his throat nervously. Perhaps we should, that is, maybe everyone needs a moment? But Elena wasn't looking at the minister. She wasn't looking at me or Valentina or the stunned guests. She was staring at Caleb with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Not anger, not heartbreak, but something worse. The complete dissolution of every illusion she'd held about the man she'd been about to marry. Rachel stepped forward from the bridesmaid line, reaching for Elena's arm, but my sister didn't move. She stood perfectly still, a bride in a $12,000 dress surrounded by scattered roses, watching her entire future reveal itself as a lie. The ballroom erupted like a disturbed hive. Caleb's business partners, seated at the premium tables near the front, were immediately on their phones. I could hear fragments of urgent conversations, liability exposure, documentation, need you here now. One man in a Tom Ford suit was already heading for the exit, his wife trailing behind him with her clutch pressed against her chest like a shield. The string quartet had stopped mid-piece, the cellist's bow frozen in air. The violinist actually stepped down from the platform, her instrument hanging forgotten at her side as she moved closer for a better view. Even the musicians understood they were witnessing something extraordinary, something that would be discussed in hushed tones for years. Behind me, our extended family section exploded in rapid Mandarin. Uncle Robert's voice rose above the rest, his words sharp with indignation. How did this happen? Where were we when Elena needed protection? Aunt Margaret was crying quietly, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief while Cousin Lisa translated for her American husband, whose mouth hung open in shock. A crash drew my attention to the front row. Caleb's mother had collapsed into her chair, her elaborate feathered hat sliding sideways as she gripped the armrests. Her husband, the supposedly dead father, stood frozen beside her, his face cycling through shades of red that couldn't be healthy for a man his age. Now I understood why Caleb had insisted on limiting his side of the guest list. Fewer people to recognize his lies. Through all this chaos, Elena began walking toward me. Her movement was dreamlike, slow, as if she were moving through water. The train of her dress dragged behind her, picking up fallen rose petals, leaving a trail of white and cream in her wake. Her tiara had shifted, sitting at an angle that would have horrified her an hour ago. Now she didn't seem to notice. When she reached me, her legs gave out. I caught her as she collapsed, a sound escaping her that was part sob, part something primal, the noise of someone whose entire reality had shattered. Her weight pulled us both to our knees on the marble floor, her dress pooling around us like spilled milk. You knew, she whispered against my shoulder, her voice broken. At the door when I turned you away, you already knew something was wrong. Not then, I told her, holding her as tightly as I could. But I knew something had changed you. That wasn't you, Elena. That was never you. I'm sorry. The words came out in a rush, over and over like a mantra. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Her tears soaked through my dress, hot against my skin. I held her the way I had when we were children, when she was 5 and thunderstorms would send her running to my room. Back then I could protect her by letting her crawl under my covers and telling her stories until the thunder passed. This storm was different, but my role hadn't changed. It's okay, I whispered, rocking her slightly. I've got you. You're safe now. Jennifer and Amy had broken from the bridesmaid line, creating a protective barrier around us with their lavender dresses. Rachel had grabbed a glass of water from somewhere, kneeling beside us with it ready. These women, Elena's true friends, had been waiting for this moment. Not the collapse, but the chance to catch her when she fell. Caleb's voice suddenly cut through the chaos, loud and desperate. Elena, this is a misunderstanding. If you'd just let me explain. The effect was immediate. Elena's body went rigid in my arms. She pulled back and I watched something shift in her face. The broken girl disappeared, replaced by the prosecutor who'd won 16 cases in her first year at the firm. She stood slowly, deliberately, smoothing her dress with hands that had stopped shaking. A misunderstanding? Her voice carried across the ballroom with crystalline clarity. Every conversation stopped. Even Uncle Robert fell silent. Elena turned to face Caleb fully, her chin raised despite the streaked mascara, despite the crooked tiara. Which part is the misunderstanding, Caleb? Or should I call you Morrison? He took a step toward her, hands raised in a placating gesture. Baby, please. Don't. The word cracked like a whip. Don't you dare call me that. Not when she's standing right there, carrying your actual baby. Elena, if you'd just listen. To what? More lies. Tell me, Caleb, which part should I listen to? Should I listen to you explain how you've been living a double life? How you've been using me for my father's reputation, my family's connections? Her voice grew stronger with each word. Or should I listen to you explain how you've kept a pregnant woman hidden away in a rundown apartment while you lived in my penthouse? Caleb's face flushed. It's not what it looks like. It never is with you, is it? Elena's laugh was bitter, sharp. Nothing is ever what it looks like. Your Harvard degree that doesn't exist. Your business that's a front. Your dead father who's sitting right there. She gestured to his parents, and his father actually stood up, looking like he wanted to say something, but his wife grabbed his arm, pulling him back down. You know what the real misunderstanding was? Elena continued, her voice now deadly quiet. Me thinking you loved me. Me thinking we were building something real. That was the misunderstanding, Caleb. Or Morrison. Or whoever you really are. Caleb's composure finally cracked completely. His face contorted with rage and he took another step forward. 2 of Elena's law school friends moved to intercept, but they didn't need to. Caleb seemed to realize he was surrounded by witnesses, cameras, and very angry relatives. He turned on his heel and headed for the exit. Not the main entrance, the service door near the kitchen. His groomsmen scrambled after him, their rented tuxedos rustling with their hurried movement. Later, when we watched the security footage, we'd see one of them actually trip over a catering cart in his desperation to leave, sending champagne glasses crashing to the floor. The wedding coordinator, a woman in her 50s who'd probably seen everything in her career except this, approached tentatively. Miss Chin, should I dismiss the guests? Elena stood straighter, looking around the ballroom at the stunned faces, the overturned chairs, the scattered roses. Then she looked at Valentina, still standing with quiet dignity despite everything, one hand on her belly. No, Elena said clearly. Let them eat the cake. Let them drink the champagne. Let them see exactly what Caleb Sterling or Morrison or whoever he is, has done. Let them remember this. The afternoon sun streamed through the kitchen window of our childhood home, casting familiar patterns across the worn wooden table where Elena and Valentina now sat together. The same table where our mother had served countless Sunday dinners, where homework had been spread out every evening, where our family had gathered for 23 years before the accident took our parents. Now it served as a war room for 2 women united by deception. Elena pushed a folder across the table toward Valentina. These are the investment documents he had me sign. Look at the witness signature on page 4. Valentina studied the page, then pulled out her phone, scrolling through saved images. That's the same signature he used on my apartment lease as the guarantor. Except there, the person's name is different. They had been doing this for hours over the past 3 weeks, comparing documents, messages, promises. The pile of evidence grew daily, spreading across the table like a map of Caleb's deceptions. Elena had transformed our father's old study into a makeshift legal office, her laptop surrounded by color-coded folders and sticky notes covering the wall behind her. "Listen to this," Elena said, reading from her phone. "March 15th. You're the only one who truly understands my vision. June 3rd. Once this deal closes, everything changes for us. September 22nd. I've never met anyone like you." Valentina held up her own phone. February 9th. "You're the only one who truly understands me." May 18th. "Once this merger goes through, everything changes." August 12th. "There's never been anyone like you in my life." They looked at each other for a moment, then Elena started laughing. Not the bitter laugh from the wedding, but something genuine if tinged with disbelief. Valentina joined in, and soon they were both wiping tears from their eyes, though whether from laughter or something else I couldn't tell. "He literally had a script," Elena managed between breaths. "We were reading from the same terrible screenplay." I watched them from the doorway, holding a tray with fresh tea and the sandwiches I'd made. These two women who should have been rivals had become something unexpected. Allies, even friends. They shared a specific kind of trauma that created understanding between them. Elena's phone rang, interrupting their laughter. She looked at the caller ID and immediately straightened, switching to her professional voice. "This is Elena Chin." Pause. "Yes, Ms. Winters, I received your documentation. 12 other women, you said." I set down the tray quietly as Elena grabbed a legal pad, writing rapidly while she listened. Valentina and I exchanged glances, both of us recognizing the name. Margaret Winters, the woman from Miami whose testimony I'd found during my initial investigation. "Across 5 states, Elena repeated, writing. "All with the same pattern. Wealthy or professionally connected, recently divorced or widowed, isolated from family support systems." Another pause. "Yes, I understand you want to testify. We're building a comprehensive case." When she hung up, Elena looked between us with an expression I recognized from her courtroom victories, determined and slightly dangerous. "Margaret's been in contact with the others. They've been finding each other online, comparing stories. The total fraud amount is over $15 million. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus at the forensic accounting firm. "The FBI wants to meet tomorrow. They found something about the car accident." Elena's eyes sharpened. "What car accident?" "Caleb's supposed business partner," I explained. "Marcus found records of someone named David Chin, no relation to us, who was investigating Meridian Innovations. He had a single car accident 6 months ago. Drove off a cliff on a clear day with no mechanical problems found." The kitchen fell silent except for the ticking of our grandmother's clock on the wall. Valentina's hand moved instinctively to her belly, where Sebastian kicked in response to his mother's sudden tension. "He wouldn't," she whispered. Elena's voice was steady, professional. "We don't know anything for certain, but the FBI is taking it seriously." He turned to me. "You'll come to the meeting tomorrow?" I nodded, and we spent the next several hours organizing documents, creating timelines, preparing for questions the FBI might ask. Elena worked with the intensity of someone seeking redemption through justice. She'd thrown herself into this case with a fervor that worried me sometimes. 18-hour days, skipped meals, law books scattered throughout the house. That night, unable to sleep, I sat in my apartment staring at the midnight blue dress still hanging in my closet. 3 weeks had passed, but I couldn't bring myself to return it or throw it away. It hung there like a monument to transformation. What had started as humiliation had become something else entirely. My phone lit up with a text from Elena at 2:14 a.m. "Can't sleep. Thank you for not giving up on me even when I gave up on us." I typed back, "That's what family does." I forgot that for a while. He made me forget a lot of things. "You remember now. That's what matters." There was a long pause before her next message. "Do you think we'll really get justice?" I thought about all the women Caleb had deceived, about Valentina's son who would be born in 2 months, about the investigation expanding daily. Justice felt too small a word for what we were seeking. This was about more than punishment. It was about prevention, about revelation, about ensuring Caleb could never do this again. We'll get something better than justice, I replied. We'll get truth. The next morning, a package arrived at Elena's law firm with no return address. Inside was a single photograph. Caleb at what looked like an international airport, the destination board blurred but visible enough to show flights to non-extradition countries. A handwritten note was paper-clipped to the photo. This isn't over. Elena brought everything to the FBI that afternoon, but the note haunted me. Caleb had vanished completely after the wedding, his accounts emptied in advance, suggesting he'd prepared for this possibility. He'd had an exit strategy all along. That evening, as I helped Valentina organize medical bills that Caleb had promised to pay but never did, she mentioned something that made my blood run cold. He used to talk about his sons, she said quietly. Both my boys, he'd say. I thought he meant Sebastian and the other boy in Phoenix. But what if there are more? What if there are other women we don't know about yet? The implications settled over us like fog. Caleb hadn't just disappeared, he'd escaped. And somewhere he was probably already working on his next deception, finding his next victim, building his next empire of lies. But this time was different. This time there were women across 5 states comparing notes, sharing stories, building networks of support. There was an FBI investigation. There were 2 women in a kitchen in Chicago, surrounded by evidence, determined to see this through. The story I thought had ended at the wedding was just beginning. Caleb thought he could disappear and start over, but he'd underestimated us. We were ready now, armed with truth and backed by the fury of women who refused to be silenced. Some men build kingdoms on deception. But kingdoms built on lies always fall. And we would be there when his did. If this story of betrayal and revelation kept you captivated until the very end, hit that like button right now. My favorite moment was when Valentina stepped forward at the altar with such quiet dignity, simply stating the truth that shattered Caleb's carefully constructed lies. What was your most powerful moment? Share it in the comments below. Don't miss more gripping stories of justice and family bonds. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.